Now today we're looking at 4 very popular aftermarket oil filters, specifically K&N. We have High Flow Filtro. This is the RC or the racing version. Wix and Fram. There's a number of differences among all 4. So let's walk through everything. We'll do some measurements, some weights, get a pretty good idea what we have here. Now before we begin, the K&N, the Wix, and the Fram are all made for the same motorcycles. The High Flow, unfortunately, when I purchased these other filters, High Flow I could not get a High Flow filter that matched the other ones. But that being said, I thought it would be really interesting just to show the characteristics, especially for the price point. Very, very priced attractively. Secondly, this is all lined up based on price. So this is the lowest costing filter, the K&N. And the Fram is the highest costing filter, and I'll include links directly to Amazon if you're curious to see if these filters fit your bike. So that being said, I'm just going to go line by line and we'll see if there are similarities, the differences, and that sort of thing. So let's start with the K&N. This runs for $7.60 on Amazon. It is made in Thailand, and the first thing that really jumped out to me when I cut open the filter was the strength of the canister. Now compare that to Fram. The canister is incredibly, incredibly strong. And this is not a knock against Fram. This is typically what you find with most, even car and truck filters, this flexibility. Even with the Wix, you can see. Now the reason why that's important is because the burst pressure is incredibly, incredibly high. Secondly, think about if you're using this on a dirt bike and you're off-roading, the puncture rate, because the thickness, and we will measure this in weight in a moment, is just incredibly, incredibly strong. I just love that the burst pressure must be, I could not dig up the burst pressure rating. I could tell you the Wix is 250 psi. That's the burst pressure with the Wix. So this must be an incredible reading. But again, we'll take a measurement in a moment. Secondly, as you can see, of course, K&N is well known to use a 17 millimeter nut that's spot welded to the end of the canister, and also it has an insert for a safety wire. Now, High Flow, again, same exact thing. Incredibly, incredibly strong canister. 17 millimeter nut again, and a safety wire insert. This is also made in Thailand, and this runs for $7.67. So it's just 7 cents more than the K&N. Now this is their RC version. There's also a non-RC version. The main parting piece with RC is the micron rating is down as low as 5 microns, and we'll talk more about that when we get over to the media itself. The Wix filter here is made in the USA. This filter is $8.70, and again we'll take a measurement and the weight in a moment. There's not much to talk about here. And same with Fram, this is also made in the USA. And let's go ahead and jump over to the scale. So let's start with the K&N. Now of course this will weigh, and the High Flow will weigh more than Fram and Wix, just because they have the 17 millimeter nut that's spot welded on the end. But nonetheless, let's see what we have here. So 2.26 ounces. Now let's just start by comparing on the same bikes. The Wix is 1.2 almost, and the Fram 1.2 almost, the exact same thing. Now if you're curious on the High Flow, 2.22. If I could easily remove the 17 millimeter end, I would, and reweigh it. Unfortunately, there's no way I'm not going to start drilling these out. But let's take a measurement with the dial caliper. And this is again good to know regarding the burst pressure and also just the strength of the filter. So let's see, about 0.6 millimeters. The Wix 0.58. 0.5. So based on the 3 filters that are interchangeable with each other, you can clearly see that K&N has the thickest canister. And even when I squeeze the Wix and the Fram in my hands, I can feel that the Wix has more resistance than the Fram canister does. If you're curious with High Flow, so about 0.65 millimeters, 0.66. Okay, now the next line up, this is your tensioner. And as you can see, you either find a stamped piece of steel or a coil spring. Now, most, even with your car and truck filters, you tend to find stamped pieces of steel. I like the coil spring. I imagine this costs a little bit more to manufacture. Plus, I just think the quality is just a little bit better with the coil spring, but I don't know if this can actually fail, to be quite honest. But the whole point behind the tensioner is it just keeps all of the components nice and tight inside the filter. Okay, so that's all that it does. Now, you may notice with Fram, the design is a little bit different because they also attach their bypass valve into the tensioner. Now, the whole point behind this valve is under very, very cold conditions, or if the valve is clogged, if the filter is clogged, this little valve would open up and unfiltered oil would get into the engine. Typically, they open up between 9 and 11 psi. That's pretty average. And if you're curious about how many gallons per minute, typical is 8 to 11. That's pretty average in terms of how many gallons per minute of oil is going through these filters. Okay, so that's all that this portion is a tensioner. And on top, on the other filters, they have the bypass valve on top of the end cap. A little hard to see without a screwdriver, but if you push this in with a screwdriver, you certainly, as you can see, you can even see the bypass valve on the bottom there. Very, very cool. Now let's talk about the media. So here with the K&N, as you can see, we have metal end caps and a metal center tube. And on some filters in the past, when I open them up, sometimes you'll find some gluing, some overspray in the gluing. In other words, when they attach the end caps to the media, you'll find the gluing overspray, and it's just messy. In this case, very, very nicely made. Now this is a synthetic media. On some other filters, they will have a cellulose, could be fiberglass, could be a blend. Now typically synthetic is a better material for the long run. Now to give you an example, if you're more familiar with car and truck filters, the Purolator Classic, which is the red can, that's the lowest costing filter. That typically runs fiberglass, cellulose. But Purolator Boss, which is a filter that's twice as much, that is 100% synthetic. The whole point behind there is that synthetic gives you the high efficiency, the capacity, and the flow rates. And I think for your money, you get a lot of bang with K&N. Now, regarding the micron rating, not every manufacturer lists the micron rating. So in this case, I cannot dig it up for K&N. If I had to take a guess, I would say this is most likely a 98 to 99% efficiency rating, between 20 and 25 microns. That's my guess. But if anyone knows for sure, please leave a comment. Would love to have that information. Now coming over to High Flow, this is a very interesting filter. Number one, it's the world's best-selling aftermarket filter for motorcycles. As you can see, metal end caps, metal center tube, no overspray in the gluing, very, very nicely made. Don't mind the black blemishes on the media. That's just me with my dirty fingers, but incredibly nicely made. Now these guys have been making filters since 1955. That being said, they also provide filters for other manufacturers such as Denso, Toyota, Ford, Mazda, Suzuki, Nissan, Hitachi, and others. I mean, they just do a terrific job on their filters. And the other thing that's pretty cool is the steel. They get it from different parts of the world, all the different parts here. So the steel could be from Japan, the glue can be from Germany, the media could be from the USA or Japan. So incredibly high materials, and for the price point, this is a $7 and I think it was 80 cents, $7.67. It's a slam dunk. I just think it's a terrific value what you have here. So the other thing is the media. This has a 5 micron rating. Now, of course, it is a racing. It's designed really for racing, but a 5 micron rating for under $8. It's just it's almost mind-blowing. Very, very cool. If you're curious regarding other manufacturers, I know Amsoil makes a 5 micron rating. I believe Harley-Davidson also makes a 5 micron rating. Now let's talk about the very popular Wix filter. Again, metal end caps, metal center tube. Regarding the media, it's enhanced cellulose, and the micron rating is 21 microns, so it's a very, very good rating. The burst pressure, again, 250 psi, and gallons per minute is 9 to 11. One thing I love about Wix is that they provide you with so much information. Other filters, it can be really hard to find. And you know, doing this at my house, I don't have the kind of machinery to set this up and test burst pressures and flow rates. So relying and getting that information from the manufacturer is just very, very nice. I love that fact. The other thing is, after doing a number of these videos, I've gotten a lot of comments that if the filter is not made in the USA, they don't want it. So if these are made in Thailand, that bothers you, Wix is an excellent choice. Even for cars and trucks, the Wix XP filters are excellent filters. So again, metal end caps, metal center tube, made in the USA, 9 to 11 gallons per minute. The pressure rating is around 10 psi on the bypass valve. Burst pressure is 250 psi. Now moving over to Fram, these are very interesting because people get very emotional over these filters, and I'll explain why in a moment. So as you can see, the spacing is very good. No overspray on the gluing. They do run a cellulose fiberglass type of media, but of course where you get the a lot of complaints is the end caps. Now these are not metal end caps. These are most likely a fiberglass type of end cap. It feels paperish, but most likely it's a fiberglass type of material. They do have a metal center tube, but I will say this. Number one is we opened a Fram filter in the past that was after 6,000 miles, and that filter was designed up to 5,000 miles. And even though it was 1,000 miles over its limit, the end caps were in still terrific shape. They were not cracking, crumbling, falling apart. They were in perfectly good shape. The other thing is, I had a vehicle many years ago, had that car up to maybe 250, 260,000 miles, and I changed the oil every 3 months, and I just ran Fram, and I never once had a problem. The thing I can always say regarding any oil filter, change it based on the manufacturer. So in other words, if your vehicle or bike states to change the filter and oil every 5,000 miles, follow that, religiously follow that, and you'll be perfectly fine. But that being said, again, they have these fiberglass type-ish end caps, cellulose or fiberglass blended type of media. And the Micron, again, I cannot dig it up. Their Extra Guard, which is very similar to this, is I believe, a 97% efficiency rating. So Micron probably between 25 or around in that ballpark. But again, it is made in the USA. Now moving to the back, this is the anti-drain back valve. Now the whole point behind this valve is when you shut off the engine, instead of having all of the oil drain out of the filter, if I can get this back on here, this little valve retains the oil inside the filter. So you don't have a dry start. So it retains the oil inside here when you shut off the engine. It's really a safety feature in a sense. It's to prevent dry starts primarily. But where you see the differences is the material. Typically you find a silicone anti-drain back valve or a nitrile rubber. Silicone is superior because it can withstand lower temperatures and higher temperatures compared to nitrile rubber. So K&N does run a silicone anti-drain back valve. Fram runs a silicone anti-drain back valve. Now it certainly is thinner. Actually, let's get that scale, I'm curious. So this is K&N anti-drain back valve, 0.11. And let's see what the Fram is. They're both for the same bike. 0.11. So it's the same exact thing. High flow, if you're curious, 0.07. It definitely is thinner in my hands. Wix, 0.07. So again, the whole point behind this valve is when you shut off the engine, the oil won't drain out of the filter. So silicone anti-drain back valve. This, it's hard to say. I couldn't dig it up. Being a racing filter, I'm guessing this is silicone, but I don't know for sure. It is a thinner material than the K&N, as you saw. I'm guessing this is silicone though. Wix, this is, to me, it feels like silicone. You could typically know right away if it's nitrile rubber because black tends to be nitrile rubber and reddish tends to be silicone, but I don't think these are nitrile rubber. I think all of these are silicone anti-drain back valves. But again, if someone knows for sure, if the manufacturer happens to see this, please, I would love to have that information. It's just good to know. And then of course on the bottom you have an all steel base plate. Where you see the differences is the number of inlet holes. in the base plate. So if you compare this with high flow has more drills in the base plate, but they're thinner in the diameter, which is sort of interesting. Here's wicks, again, more, but the diameter is thinner. And take a look at Fram. And that's pretty much what we have here. I hope this gives you a pretty decent idea on where the differences are among all of these filters. If I missed anything, if you'd like to see anything else, if you'd like to see other filters, please leave a comment below. I do read comments, and if I do miss anything, I try to make a point to make these future videos even better. And until next time, thanks for watching.